Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Rosenblatt. I'm the program director of the Jewish Film Institute. Welcome to JFI's programming event on Main Street. This is our fourth year as a Sundance affiliate. Each year, we highlight a film that is premiering at Sundance and initiate a conversation with the filmmakers. This year, we are honored to focus on Ondi Timoner's powerful, moving, amazing documentary, Last Flight Home. But first, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Ash Hoyle, who will then bring on Ondi and a special guest. Ash Hoyle is an integral member of the programming team at the Sundance Film Festival. He works as an associate program for shorts and features and supports director of programming, Kim Utani. He is also the director of programming at Damn These Heels Film Festival run by the Utah Film Center, as well as senior programmer at Outfest in Los Angeles and a programmer at the Palm Springs Shorts Fest. Welcome, Ash, and take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Jay, for that warm introduction, and especially to the Jewish Film Institute for being such a wonderful partner to Sundance and for hosting this conversation. The film, as he mentioned, that we're discussing today is The Last Flight Home, which is premiering at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Monday, January 24th at the Sundance 2022 Film Festival in our special screening section. I'm really excited to be joined by someone who's a familiar face to Sundance. The director of this film is Ondi Timoner. She's a Grand Jury Prize winner in our documentary section multiple times over, and her sister, Rabbi Rachel Timoner, who's a central participant in this incredibly groundbreaking documentary. Welcome, Ondi and Rachel.
So glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
And congratulations. This is really, like Jay said, it's an amazing work of documentary cinema and an incredibly, obviously, personal and emotional project for you both. And so the first thing I want to talk about is what it was like to bring both of your expertise to this moment. You obviously, Rabbi, as a rabbi, and you, Ondi, as a filmmaker. How did you use sort of these two practices to make meaning in your the final days that you had with your father?
I suppose I'll start because chronologically, it was sort of, I was first on the scene because I live 10 minutes from mom and dad, and Rachel's in New York. So it was nightly Zooms for Rach for a while. And I was really dad's primary caregiver and sort of the quarterback of his care, starting with when he went in the hospital. It's in my nature, I suppose, as a producer. And I just felt like someone needed to kind of run, figure out what was going on. It was a surprise to all of us when our father told us that he wanted to die. He was one of the most resilient, tenacious people that maybe perhaps the most that any of us ever knew. And he was always quick to say he'd be there, to see Juki off to college or any number of milestones that were coming up. And so for him to want to check out after a few days in the hospital was very surprising. And so I was there and I was panicked about losing him. And I knew that once we figured out that he could go into a hospice situation, that there would be a mandatory waiting period, that in fact, he would qualify, but it would be probably between 15 and 20 days left of having dad on this planet with us. I felt a real need to bottle him up somehow and put cameras there. And that's what I always film what I appreciate and what I love, or what I'm trying to figure out. It's just my way of surviving. And I went to go see a spiritual advisor that I have about my problem with this situation, because I didn't want anything to interfere, mediate my experience, even my experience, but definitely dad's and definitely Rachel's and the family's. And I know Rachel's not very comfortable with cameras. It was all, it was all happening so fast. And I wanted to say, should I be doing this? And I don't know what else to do. And she said, if you feel you need to do this, you should do this, but you should just fill yourself up first with all the energy and exchange that you need to have with your father, and then turn the cameras on. And I didn't do exactly that. I basically tried to make the cameras something that existed in the room, that were just kind of like, sometimes they'd be filming nothing for hours on end. They were just there. And then all in like a side room, just have like batteries and cards, and just, it became like this seamless process. And especially wanted that in place by the time Rachel came, because I knew that Rachel's sensitive, and I didn't want to like, upset her or anyone. And of course, as the days were getting closer to Dad's death, it was going to be more and more tense and more sensitive of an environment. So I have to say that I now look back, and I can't believe I did that, but also, and then my dad was 100%, our father was 100% supportive, like even in the most vulnerable moments. And you'll see in the movie that he complains about it, but he never did to me, and he always said, I instinctively know you're on the right track. And I'm really glad that I did it now, and I think it's probably the best. It's always been my dream to tell Dad's story. I didn't anticipate telling it this way. I've been working on a script for years. And that was the other reason I set up cameras, because I needed to review the screenplay with him and get his final words about all of the facts of his life and the way that I was portraying them. So I really had no anticipation of making a doc, but I feel like it's the best use of 30 years of doing this that I've ever, for so many reasons, from my mom watching it every night to how we're about to share something with the world that everyone has to go through. So I'm just really grateful to Rachel, especially, for not shutting it down, because I would have, if she asked me to. I asked her permission in advance, and she's like, this is not what I would want, but she went with it. So yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi, what was that like for you?
Well, when our dad started calling me every day, he's calling all of us every day saying, I want to die. Please help me die. Please help me die. I want to die today. Help me die today. It was just heartbreaking, and it made me feel so powerless. I wanted to relieve his suffering. I wanted to help him have a good death. And he was begging us. And for a lot of the time in the beginning, when he was first started saying that, I didn't know that it was legal in California, that it was possible at all. And then when I think it was David, our brother, who first figured that out, maybe it was Ondi, I don't know, but then it was like, okay, there's a path to do this, but it's really complicated. It's a complicated thing for me as a rabbi, and for all of us as his children, and the idea that it was going to be on film was really, 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 really not comfortable for me. And another piece for me is that he was very, very clear. He's been clear since I became a rabbi that he wanted me to be his rabbi when he died. And I had been clear that I wanted to be his daughter, and I am his daughter, but he really needed me to be his rabbi in addition to being his daughter. And that was really complicated for me. I didn't have as much time to just be able to have the feelings that a daughter would have. I had to kind of hold it together and try to guide him in the ways that he needed. And the complication of knowing that there were cameras looking at us, it just was like not what I would choose. But look, everything, in a family is always about compromise, and here we are. And then this film, is also like, it's not, death in Judaism is something that part of the dignity of it is that it's usually private, and so to have lots of people viewing his death is hard for me, but I also understand very much that this film could help a lot of people. And that piece feels like it's really worth it. And I really support my sister. I think she made something very beautiful. And even with all my mixed feelings about it, I'm really proud of her, and I think it's really beautiful. And I love my dad, and I'm proud of him, and I'm glad for people to be able to meet him and see him in this really intense time at the end of his life.
Yes, absolutely. And you both handled these really serious roles in the choreography in these final days with such grace. I imagine it was much more difficult, but was there anything enlightening about your experience as a filmmaker or your experience as a rabbi in the moments when you had to apply it to such a personal situation, what did you learn from that? What was that experience sort of like? And did you take it forward, obviously, in your separate practices?
I've never been through the death of a loved one to such an extent. I've had a close friend die, but never a family member. I've been lucky to make it this far in life without that. And I felt like we were all walking on the moon, honestly. I've never been through anything so incredibly sacred and profound in my life. And I'm not just talking about the day of, I'm talking about how much life and love there is in that space that we were able to experience and create together. It was like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. When I would have to come home and go to sleep, I would just want to wake up and go back. And it wasn't just, oh, because I'm going to lose dad, but it was, I should say, and Rachel touched on it, but he was an extraordinary, funny, smart, so sharp-witted. He says things in this film that just make everyone crack up laughing, no matter how many times you've seen it, you know? And he was so fearless about all of this that it helped all of us, I think, immeasurably. But there's no way to describe really this until you go through it yourself. And it was a blessing, I have to say, to know when he was going to die, because we really could take the time to and make the space to make this an incredibly, special experience for everyone and for dad. And we had a challenge with dad to really get him to see how extraordinary he was before he died. And I think he'd gone through many years of not feeling that way. And so, Rachel and I colluded on that a bit, and I should say collaborated, but there were a lot of like challenges. But one last thing I'll say before Rachel speaks is just that we called ourselves the T team. Mom called us the T team from an early age because, dad had a health situation 40 years prior that was very serious. And we all kind of gathered then and brought our A game to the table. And I felt very much like this was, in a weird way, like each one of us serves this puzzle, is a puzzle piece in this family. And we each just delivered everything we could. My brother, who's not on this call, our brother is a phenomenal person. And he was just there in every way he could, physically, especially helping after work. And I'm lucky enough to be an independent filmmaker who was able to just wipe it during COVID, was able to wipe my calendar clear. And then Rachel every night would sing to dad and be with dad. And there were just ways in which each one of us, and then Rachel guided us spiritually through the whole thing. So I felt very blessed on so many levels on the way that this worked out, and especially just the different members of the family and the expertise that we have, kind of all coming together in this way to make something very painful also very beautiful. Yeah,
absolutely.
Great. A big part of my life is being with people when they die, and to be able to bring that to this moment for my father, to even just a little bit ease his suffering in terms of his mental and emotional anguish about his life, which he really carried quite a lot, was just so incredibly meaningful to me. Like I knew in those days that I was really helping him. And that was like the most amazing thing to be able to know, to be able to help my father as he was dying. I knew that I was making a difference for him. And then all of us being around him and caring for him. I feel like we did the very, very best we could do for him as he was dying. And, that's as good as it gets. Yeah. And as Ondi said, like, he's hilarious. And so like, we were also laughing, and we were like, it's not, I mean, there's parts of the film that are sad, but that experience in those last weeks, there was just a lot of humor and a lot of love. And so it was also kind of just uplifting in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And it was something I feel like that I took away from the film myself. It was this opportunity to watch your father offer so many blessings and so many incredible pieces of wisdom and uplifting thoughts that he shared with you guys and with the friends that you were able to connect him to. I want to talk a little bit about him and that wisdom. One thing I love about the film as well is how much we get to learn sort of about his history, and anything you want to speak to now, about his accomplishment in his life, please feel free. How much do you think of his value system came from Judaism? What parts of what he was offering in those final days did you feel like were part of a Jewish sort of tradition or practice or character?
Should I take that one, Ondi?
I was impressed though with how he returned to Judaism at the end.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't look at the last few months of his life, but looked at just the rest of his life, you would think this is a person who really kind of was always proud to be a Jew and was always really loyal to the Jewish people, and spent a lot of his life raising money for Jewish causes and for Israel. Really, really important to him that he was a Jew and that he would stand with the Jews, thick and thin, through thick and thin. But in terms of Judaism, like God, religion, prayer, synagogue, Jewish spiritual practice, Jewish observance, this was a person who he had mostly walked away from it. He had really mostly in his life walked away from it. And one of the main stories he would tell about growing up in Hebrew school in a conservative synagogue on Long Island was like that he would, run away from class and like leave, like play hooky. He would never go. He'd go to the movies instead, and his parents never knew. So like that was him. And when I wanted to be a rabbi, he did not think that was good. He didn't want me to be a rabbi. He was gentle about it, and but it was not his choice for me. And then in the last years of his life, actually through, I think to some degree, my being a rabbi, he was a little bit more present in synagogue because he wanted to be there with me. And it started to be really meaningful to him. And I remember there were times when he'd come to High Holy Days and weep and say he was remembering his parents, Ben and Ray, and thinking about how much it would mean to them that he was there and that I was there doing what I was doing. So he was starting to kind of make those connections again and return. But even a few months before he died, I asked him about whether he felt that he had a soul and whether he'd been thinking about what happens when you die. A little bit of that is in the film. And he did not have, I would say he was agnostic about God. He wasn't an atheist, but he did not have a feeling of connection to God. And he did not have a feeling of having a soul until like really close to the end. And then he started to really have a strong sense, like a very strong sense about that. So, but you also asked about his values and about what shaped him in his life in terms of his work. And his values were so strong around justice and truth and really what I would call righteousness, though he would never call it righteousness, but just about like, do the right thing. You just do. He never, ever talked about it. He never made a big deal about it. You would never know. It just was common sense to him that is what you do. You treat people with respect. He told my son at the end of his life, you love the people you know, the people you don't know, you treat with respect. Like he just walked through the world that way. And I do think, like many Jews who walk away from Jewish institutional life, from synagogue, from Jewish religious life, are still so shaped by the Jewish ethos, by those ideas about justice, about compassion, about respecting your fellow human being, about human dignity. And these were just intrinsic to him. And also about honesty. He was such an honest person. He cared. The thing he asked me about his eulogy is it truthful? About whether he asked me to write his eulogy. And when I wrote it, he asked me, is it truthful? That was his only question. That is who he was. And I think that he was very much shaped by his parents and by his community who were Jewish. And I think that he absorbed that and then walked away from the kind of official practices of Judaism, but it was in him.
Yeah, that makes it, you see it, you feel it for sure. Ondi, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Rachel covered it. I mean, I think that one thing though is, Rachel and I have been working on a project that we will be continuing after this that very much is about those very Jewish values of justice, and Rachel's on the forefront of some really incredible work right now that I'm documenting. But Dad, he also just was that. Like, there was not a person I've ever known before or since. Well, I didn't know anybody before him, but I've never met anybody who didn't have to question whether or not something was the right thing to do. He just literally did it. Any time it would be an argument one of us would be having with our mom, and he would, even if he was always her champion, but he would always, he was the guy to talk to, because he would always know if we were maybe wrong, you know, and he would try to make peace no matter what, because it was never about being right. It was always about peace. It was about peace. And so he was just an incredible model to live by for all of us to have, you know, and that's probably the greatest feeling I have about the film, is that the greatest gift of the film really is that you get to have that model too. If you watch this film, you know, he's just an exemplary person. So absolutely. He didn't even know that. That wasn't even playing with him. It was not even about that, or any kind of thought of legacy or anything like that. He was just good. Such humility.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this sort of brings up something I'd like to hear you both speak on as well. You've both spoken about the film as something that you can see as being a help to people. That feels obvious to me as well. But it's also so complicated, so complex. And from a point of view, both of, you know, obviously it takes on these issues about, you know, right to die. Obviously, there's sort of a legality to it in the ways that you have to navigate it geographically, and you still do in the United States. There's that bit, and there's also a sort of this question in my mind as well of how meaningful it is to see just Jewish life on screen in general as sort of a representative film as well. And so in those two veins or others, what are you hoping that people are going to walk away with from this film? I imagine it's sort of hard to distill, but what does that bring up for you?
I mean, I think that both Jewish life and you know, understanding the nuances of what death with dignity really looks like and means, and how important it actually is, which I had never really thought about. Of course, I thought, well, of course we should have the right to die. We put our pets to sleep. You know, if we're in pain, why can't we have the right to go about that in a legal sense? And if we're terminally ill, being a very important factor, I think, in that. But I think that both of those things are, because the film is not a political film, it just kind of, it exists, and it's just, those are playing. You know, I learned about Judaism by listening to Rachel with Dad throughout this film. It was really, I mean, through the filming of this and through just being in the room, I didn't know, oh no, my landline, here we are. Oh good, somebody got it. I didn't know that in a Jewish burial, we throw dirt into the grave to tuck our loved one in. You know, I was so happy to be able to do that till the tractor showed up, you know what I mean? But what a beautiful tradition. And I'm so happy that that's in the film for other people to know about, whether they're Jewish or not. You know, just some of the really beautiful traditions are in the film. And Rachel can speak to that more, but yeah. And then I think Death with Dignity, although this is not a film that's, you know, I'm happy for organizations to use it as they will for that, but it wasn't made with that intent. It is really so vitally important to our Father when he makes this decision. And it's really, if he was in New York, it wouldn't have been possible for him to be able to do that. And so, and it's only in 9 states and districts in the entire Union of the United States, which is shocking to me. So people are out there on the front lines working really hard for this. And the nurse and social worker in the film are both coming to be with us in the couple little watch parties that we're having, and it's super important to them. And they're really proud of this and the work that they do. It's very courageous. So yeah, I'm happy that the film touches on or embodies both of those things. Yeah.
I would say, you know, we're all going to die. And death in America is a taboo subject. Often it's something that people avoid. And one of the things that's a gift for me about what I do is that being with people at the end of their life and being with people in a funeral, you get to see the beauty of a life at its end. And there's such a thing as a good death. And if we only avoid death and don't talk about it and don't look at it, we won't have the possibility of a good death, because we won't be able to have the conditions to be able to think ahead of time about, what do we want to say to our loved ones when they're dying? How do we want to be with them? I think this film has a lot to teach about how dying can be done, and including the questions of the right to die, but also including what it is like when you're a family member of somebody who's dying. Like what are the possibilities for ritual? Like one of the big things that happens in the film is there's a vidui, which is, the confession that we say on Yom Kippur, but that also we say at the end of our lives. I think a lot of Jews don't know about vidui, and it's a beautiful practice. And there are things that we can do that are about making meaning at the end of life. And I think this film just shows some of it, because it's what we were doing. And they're Jewish, and those are things to learn, but also for everybody just to have a sense of like, wow, if it's not sudden and I have the ability to be in a dying process, who do I want around me? If I'm with someone who's dying, what do I want to say? How do I want to care for them? How do I want to hold them through that process? I think it raises all of that, and not in a way that's just sad, in a way that's like also really beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So well said.
One more thing. I think that what I was trying to say to some other question was about how much life there was in this process. By that, I mean, nothing outside felt that important. And I feel like so much of the time we think, oh, we'll get in touch with that person soon, or we'll tell that person we love them, or, and one response that I've heard again and again to this film is that people stop watching the film and immediately call people that they love, or write people that they love and tell them that they love them. And I think hopefully that's a big part of what I want people to take away from the film, is just, you don't have to wait to die, to have someone die that you love, to tell them all this stuff, You can tell them now and every day between now and then. And, and I said to Dad said to me, would you rather get a call one morning that I've gone? Isn't this better? And it's not to say that it is always better to plan your death, but it was an opportunity for us to do this, an opportunity that most of us won't have, and so we kind of have to, it's almost an imperative. It is an imperative to prioritize looking and celebrating one's life and the lives of those around you and your family, and, throwing piddly things to the side while we're here. It really does. The most important things in life, like, do rise to the surface in those final weeks. And although all the audience isn't going to be going through that, in a way they are, because it is very intimate. So hopefully that'll be a takeaway.
I want to just add something. I had said before we started that I didn't want to talk about this, but I think I have to, which is I need to acknowledge that that in Judaism, life is sacred, and we do not actually in Jewish law support any actions like what this film represents. Like Jewish law, we're not supposed to hasten death. We're not supposed to take any action to make death happen, even if a person's suffering, even if it's their wish, even if they're in agony. And this is a complicated thing for me as a rabbi to have been in this position where my dad needed me, and where I'm also representing Judaism. And I just need to say in this interview that I'm aware that we did something that violates Jewish law. And I've written a piece that it's gonna come out around the opening that that's basically saying, like, even though I never would have chosen this particular issue to champion, like this was not a thing on my agenda. I have a lot of issues I already work on, but here we are. And I realize in going through this process that it's time for us, I think, as a Jewish people to question our approach, because And, you know, there are actually halakhic arguments. You can make Jewish legal arguments about why we should be considering this, and why we should be trying to support people who are only seeking to have a death that with less suffering. When death is inevitable, when a person is terminally ill and death is going to be soon, no matter what you do, and that person wants to make a choice to have that be gentler, less painful, or quicker, perhaps it's time for us as a Jewish people to consider whether we want to change our approach and make that okay. And I am finding myself like, you know, it wasn't my intention, but here I am, like maybe having to kind of start speaking for that.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it strikes me as a sort of very Jewish practice to question and to evolve in these important ways. And so I thank both of you for opening yourselves up to be so brave, to expose this very personal experience to perhaps benefit the community. I think is a true triumph of filmmaking, a true triumph in your rabbinic practice. We could talk obviously for hours and hours, but we're coming down to time. And I just want to say how grateful I am for you sharing this film with us at Sundance and with our audiences, and to the JFI for letting us get a little bit more deep into the conversation here. You've both been so insightful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ash. And
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel, for joining and how busy you are.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Congrats to you both.
Okay. Thanks, Ash. Bye.